In the Wild West world of podcasting, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
My flock, this will not be a war of heroes. Nations will slaughter each other while we get rich. This is going to be fun.
You cannot keep me locked away as the world burns.
Son, the truth is the world is ruled by corruption and greed.
We must do something.
Certainly.
We are the first independent intelligence agency. Refined but brutal. Civilized but merciless.
Welcome to the club.
Very clever.
It's time to pour fuel on the fire of revolution.
Yes, my shepherd. Welcome, Englishman.
Rasputin, your reputation precedes you.
Let's end this as gentlemen. After all, manners maketh man.
Why is it that boys are always so messy?
My next guest has a wonderful filmography, including Man in the High Castle, My Spy, Jolt, Peter Rabbit 1 and 2, the very cool Monsters at Work, and the upcoming Kingsman and Bullet Train starring Brad Pitt. Welcome, Dominic Lewis. Dominic, thank you for giving me so much of your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So, Dominic, I don't know if I always feel better when I read this, but I feel like people that are raised in a household surrounded by music, in your case, I think both your parents, I always feel that's a much more welcoming place and environment than the child that had to grow up in the family that the dad is preaching, get a job that pays, solid pay, 7 to 3 or 8 to 5. I always feel, am I living in like a utopias world, or is that wishful thinking? What is that, Dom?
I think that's very true. I mean, I've been very, very lucky to be to have such wonderful parents. I mean, I dropped out of university after one term. I was studying music, but I was writing about music instead of writing music. And I remember calling my dad and just being like, Dad, I don't think this is for me. I'm really not enjoying it. He's like, all right, well, whatever you need to do, we'll figure it out. Whatever you want to do, we'll figure it out. So I don't think many parents would be that cool about their kids dropping out of university. But it's just one of those things, I think, with the arts and with music and the arts, it's massively underfunded in pretty much every country. And it's sort of, I think it's just kind of regarded as a bit of a hobby by a lot of households. So it's, it's never really thought as a way to, earn a living.
No, that's a really good point. And when you say drop out, are you talking about the Royal Academy of Music?
No, I stuck that one out.
Okay.
So I went to Nottingham University to study music, thinking that I was going to be writing film music. And,
Gotcha.
Basically it was my fault. I read the course, whatever you call it.
Syllabus?
Yeah, syllabus.
Yeah.
Completely wrong. I turned up and they were asking us to write like the effects of religion on 16th century counterpoint, and I was sitting there going, what the hell did I get myself into? So after a few months of that, I was like, no, thank you, I got to get out of this.
So just judging by what you said about Dad, I have a feeling that, assuming both Dad and Mom are still with us, that they're very proud of what their son has become and what you've made of yourself. Even if they're not with us, I'm assuming the same.
They are with us. Yes, they are.
Excellent.
They are with us, and they're very proud. My dad's not as vocal as my mum. My mum is a wonderful human, but has never really had much of a filter for anything, and especially not when it comes to my achievements, which is so lovely. But she's always she's always bragging about me she lives in a little village in England, and she's always bragging about me in the village shop and anyone she can, really. So that's super sweet.
No,
Dad's like that typical kind of dad. He's not. It takes quite a lot for him to get emotional, but when he says, "I'm really proud of you," or something, like when he eventually gets there, it kind of means more because he never really says it that much. So, but I mean, I can just tell he's he's not as vocal as Mum, though.
Yeah, so your mom, talking about your mom brings me to my next question. We talk about, I was doing research on your life. One of the things I watched was a very cool video about this phenomenal studio of yours, right?
Right.
We have a term in the States, you're in the States, so right now, so called man cave, right?
Right.
Everyone talks about how great their man cave is. Some are legit, some are, a computer between a washer and a dryer. You, my friend, to say yours is legitimate might be an understatement. And the reason I'm going to this, and I want to talk a little bit about this wonderful studio, is that you talk about, the appreciation of being an artist, right? So you indeed have illustrations that you made and that Mom framed.
I do, yeah. There was a part of my younger life where I thought maybe I'll be an artist. Maybe I'll be like a draftsman or a watercolor painter or something of that ilk. So we'd have this thing in the UK called GCSEs, which is it's exams you take when you're 15, basically, and it's supposed to help you get into a better university, but no one tells you at 15 that they don't mean anything. But anyway, so being an arty guy, I did art, music, and drama. So I have all these pictures of that I drew when I was 15, and my mum, the lovely lady that she has, had them framed and brought them out to LA for me. So yeah, they're in the bathroom of the studio, but still, at least they've got a place somewhere.
Yeah, and I don't know how you get anything done. I mean, just watching this video, of all what this studio is, it's a very impressive place. And you have a poster wall, and I have to say, I have a poster wall with some great autographs too, but yours much more to you because you are actually in these projects, right? So when I'm looking at Jodie Foster's autograph on Money Heist, she clearly loves your work. So that's the difference between you and I, is you're very, very talented. So talk a little about some of those posters. I got to say the most impressive by far, Dom, is the Peter Rabbit Banksy poster, and they're all very cool posters. And you've got autographs from George Takei on everything that you've been a part of, all your projects. But the Banksy, the Banksy type poster, the Peter Rabbit, very, very cool, Dom.
It's super cool. And Will only had, I think, 5 or 6 of them made. I don't know exactly. There's not very many of them made up. And I was very lucky enough to get one. And he wrote a very lovely message on it for me. And I sort of... it's in the style of Banksy. It looks like the side of a building or a wall that's been, and Peter Rabbit's been graffitied on it. The inspiration, I think, is it's a rioter throwing a bunch of flowers, and this is Peter Rabbit with a carrot. So I had it framed in a way that it looks like it's in a museum. It's definitely a really cool piece to have on the wall. But as are all of them. But I guess it's probably my most successful movie at the box office to date. So I made a bit more of a big deal about it.
Yeah, and it really is. And my last question about this is, one of the things that I thought was really cool is when people come in, they autograph, well, people that are musically inclined, not like if I stumbled in, but like they autograph, I want to say it's an Abbey Road, I want to say it's what would you call it, a poster, a tin, I don't know.
It's a street sign.
Sign,
so,
okay, yep.
Yeah, it's a street name. So I used to live just off Abbey Road when I was at the Royal Academy, and Dad would record there regularly. So
wow.
I would sort of pop in for lunch, and eventually when I started doing my scores and stuff, I was recording there. So Abbey Road, and obviously being a massive fan of the Beatles, Abbey Road has got a very special place in my heart. So I have an Abbey Road street sign, a fake one, not really, I didn't nick it, I'd be arrested. But so I've got a fake one made up, and so it's just as you come into the studio, and then we've been in a pandemic, so there's not many signatures at the moment, but any people that I work with, I encourage to sign the sign, because that's what happens on Abbey Road. For the people that know and people that don't know, the wall outside Abbey Road is covered in fans' messages to the Beatles and other people that recorded there, and so it's sort of, that was the inspiration for that.
No, it's very cool, and I got very thirsty watching you drink gin and tonic. So moving forward, now that we know each other, I expect an invitation down the road. So Dom, I want to just thank you for talking about that.
You're always welcome. Always welcome.
I mentioned earlier about the Royal Academy of Music, and I believe it's there you develop a relationship and rapport with Rupert Gregson-Williams. Is my timeline correct on that?
It kind of blossomed at that point. I actually met Rupert when I was 15. I was at school with his stepdaughter, Sadie, and I think I was at her birthday party, and I just sort of started to fall in love with film music, and Dad had started to do sessions, and Rupert was awesome and kind of said, well, if you're into it, why don't you come down to the studio and you can, sit at the back of the studio and just watch and pick up some things. And since that day, he's sort of been my original mentor. And I definitely wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you if he hadn't been such an amazing human being and let me into his world and sort of taught me the tricks of the trade.
And Dom, it's not that he's been good, it's that he's been good for so long. Like, it's longevity and being good for a long period of time that really defines greatness, I think, right?
Definitely. He's just got impeccable taste. He's just in everything, whether it's music or cars or whatever. I respect the man a lot, and I owe him so much. I'm in debt to him.
Yeah, and I know your instrument is a cello, right? That's the one that came naturally first to you. And I think you can pay obviously more than that, but the cello is the one that you learned first. Is that correct, Dom?
That's right. I started cello when I was 3.
Wow, that's very impressive.
My parents weren't pushy parents either. They weren't forcing me to do it. It was my choice. I wanted to do it. So
yeah, and let me ask you, and I went back and forth with asking you this question because I felt like it might have come across as stupid, but can somebody score a piece of music, TV or movies, without knowing how to play an instrument? I feel like I just defined what a DJ is, but can somebody do that without knowing an instrument? Like, if I knew no instrument, I couldn't do it, but can somebody put pieces of music together without knowing how to play an instrument?
Yeah, I think people do. I think there are people out there, composers, that do that. I mean, not all of us were as lucky to be kind of brought up around music and being able to play instruments and learn instruments. So, I think the era of the bedroom composer and the bedroom producer and DJ has been with us for a while, but it's definitely fully upon us now. There's so many samples and different things you can pull from. People create. There's a whole thing called Splice that, it's just free samples for DJs and producers and composers to go and basically just use them in their tracks, royalty free. So yeah, it's completely on the cards, and people do it.
And I hate to say that. I kind of want to add to that. So, like, is there more? I don't. It's going to sound like I'm really getting hard on those people that don't know how to play instruments. But so in your case, you're obviously a cello. You know an instrument. Many of the composers I've had they know instruments they've been playing since, like in your case, 3, 4, 5 years old. If you take music that somebody else created, those samples, and you put them together, isn't there a little bit less, like, so if I'm talking Thomas Newman, if I'm talking Hans Zimmer, those guys know instruments. I'm talking you know instrument. I just interviewed Natalie Holt, big cellist as well, piano. So I feel like, is there something more to be said for somebody that can just, is it more organic, I guess? I mean, I don't want to read too much into it, Dom, but is it more organic?
I think so. I mean, there's someone that has spent all of their life and a long period of time studying music. I think you're right. I think there's definitely more. I can't think of the word, but I'd say that the way of making music that I just described, which is kind of like taking samples and using things like that, I would feel more comfortable putting of a kind of a producer role on that if they're not necessarily coming up with original material. But it's hard at the angle of the question. It's I would say that I'm definitely one to gravitate more towards original material and people that whether they can play an instrument or not, but someone who can create on something original material, as opposed to kind of grabbing things that already exist and making music out of them, which is also an incredible skill. Don't get me wrong. But if we're talking about film composers and we're talking about media and TV composers, I would definitely put my hat in the circle of, I think you do need to know your way around an instrument or know how to write for them if you can't play it. Because that's essentially what I do. I mean, I don't know how to play every single instrument in the world, but I know how to write for an oboe. I know how to write for a flute. I couldn't for the life of me play one. So whether you play it or not, I don't think is the be-all and end-all. It's just whether you know what those things do and how you can write for them.
Yeah, that's really well said. And as somebody who, I bring up my daughter almost every episode, really happy dad here. 1 year old, we're watching Monsters at Work. We absolutely love it. 3 episodes in. Speaking of kids, your kids have to be super proud of their dad who makes music for movies and television, or are they too young to realize that? I mean, I feel like one of your kids is like 6 or 7 in that ballpark.
Yeah, Wilder is 6. And he kind of recently has moved into the proud child, which is awesome.
Yes.
He didn't really care before. And he loves his TV. I mean, I know all kids do, but my oldest is has since kind of 18 months will sit through a whole film. Whereas my youngest, can't concentrate for more than, he's 3. And he still can't concentrate through a whole episode of Monsters at Work. So he's just too busy. But Wilder wants to make movies, he says. He doesn't want to write the music. He wants to make movies. I guess that's the product of being a child who lives in Hollywood. And then Quincy's very musical. Quincy constantly says how he wants to, grow up to be a man and write music like Daddy. So what more could you want?
Oh my God. I was just going to say that. I'm like, what more as a dad could you want than your kids to want to be like their father? That's just beautiful stuff.
Me. That's what I did. That's the whole reason I started the cello at 3 is because I wanted to be like Dad.
Yeah. That's really beautifully said. Is there something that you can do musically in an animated series or movie, Dom, that you can't do in a traditional movie, as far as scoring goes?
I think lots is the answer to that. I mean, you're definitely freer with the orchestra in a more traditional sense when it comes to animated material. For example, a sort of story that relates to that is that when the King's Man that's coming out in December is an orchestral score, a purely orchestral score, but Matthew Vaughn would often, slap me on the wrist for being too animation. By that, what he meant is that when you get too floral with the orchestration within the orchestra, it tends to either depict kind of nostalgia and, I don't like this word, but for want of a better word, cheesy way of scoring stuff. It does kind of push you into that. The floral stuff lets you go into that animation world easier and just creates a bit more magic. I'm not quite sure what I'm saying, but
no, I get it.
There's definitely, it's coming back. I think it's coming back. The orchestral way of scoring and the more traditional way of stuff, I think is coming back. I've seen little snippets of Jungle Cruise that's coming out, I think this weekend or next weekend, and James Newton Howard is definitely playing into the kind of Spielbergy, Lucas way of doing things. So that brings joy to my heart. But over the last kind of the Zimmer generation, it's been kind of frowned upon to use the orchestra in a traditional classical way. But fingers crossed, touch wood, it's coming back.
No, I hope you're right. And let me ask.
I'm sorry.
You definitely did. Yeah. So you brought up Kingsman, and you're co-scoring this one with Matthew Margeson, directed by Matthew Vaughn. What is your? I mean, not that I would expect you to say something negative. Is it easier or harder to co-score, or is it just simply different? Right? Because if you're the sole composer, it's not like you have free reign, right? You still have to go through the director, and I get that. There's a chain, but does co-scoring? Does that? I mean, I imagine it would be like any rapport or relationship, right? There's good and bad in it, right? What is your take on that co-scoring versus scoring something of just your own?
It's quite a lot of elements to unpack. So I'll start with the first thing, that doing something with Matt was. There's so many Matts involved in this project. So let me just be clear. Matt is Matt Margeson, and
right.
Matt, when I say Matthew, that would be Matthew Vaughn. So doing something with Matt is something we've always wanted to do. We've been in the wings on so many films for other composers, and been in the trenches and really kind of done a lot of the nitty gritty. So we've always said to each other that we'd love to do a co-write. We get on so well. I mean, it's one of those kind of almost like a brotherhood of remote control. And when you go through so much with someone, you're able to come out the other end. It's just really easy to work with that person. So that's the first thing. Working with Matt is super easy, and we complement each other so well. We push each other. We tell each other if we think it's rubbish or not, or when it's great. So I'd say working with Matt and doing a co-write with Matt is amazing and easy. Not necessarily easier than doing it by yourself. I think if I had to work with someone I didn't really know and do a co-write I didn't know, and trying to get to know them and figure out what their style is, how they work, their process, all that kind of stuff, that could be tricky. I haven't had that experience. On this particular film, it's just one of those things that I think Matt would say the same. Excuse me. We would not have got through it without each other. It was just one of those movies that really kind of, slapped us in the face, kicked us in the private. The whole shebang. We were on it for nearly 2 years. The movie changed considerably from when we started. We had to move to London. I was there on set with a mobile rig set up so Matthew could come in and listen to ideas. And we were just really put through the ringer. So it was actually lovely to have that brother next to you that was in it with you the whole way, and you could lean on each other. Because I really think if it had just been one of us, perhaps either one of us may have drowned, because it was tough. But then when you come out the other side of it, we have this. I literally can't wait for people to hear this, because I'm so proud of this score, and I know Matt thinks the same thing. So when you come out the other end of being, you're battered, you're bruised, you're black and blue, and then you hit play on the score that you've created, and you're like, wow, that actually was really worth it. I definitely do another movie with Matt, 100%, but the process of Kingsman was really intense.
No, hearing you describe it gives me goosebumps, because when I watch a movie, I think it's the score that catches me more than anything, right? I mean, I feel like a movie score can take an average movie and make it above average. And that's how much credence I put in it. And hearing you talk about this, so seriously, it gives me goosebumps. Like, this is the kind of score that, like, I go to the movies in the cinema hoping to hear, Tom.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I hope you feel that when you listen to it, because, and not to sound like cliche and an idiot, but there was something about like being put through the ringer. All of us, Matthew Vaughn would say the same thing. Like, he had to really fight through ideas and figure out story arcs, and it was just one of those films that kept bringing up things that were, bumps in the road that we had to figure out. And because of the subject matter and being, the First World War and the story and the difficulty of all the characters and the story arc and the journey, it was kind of like, how could you possibly put yourself in that position and create music to emulate these emotions? So the best that the universe could give us was to really put everyone, including Matthew Vaughn, through the ringer in getting this movie done. So I'm not in any way comparing having a difficult time on a film to being in the First World War in the trenches, but there was that element of like, wow, this is really tough. We've got to push. Everyone's got to get together and come together and get through it. So I really do. And that sounds really, really crappy and like Hollywoody, but it did feel like that.
No, it doesn't.
Like close to the finish line.
Yeah, it sounds genuine. It sounds very genuine. So let me ask you, looking at your career, Dom, right? I feel like it comes in waves, right? It seems like for a bit it was animated. Now it seems like we take Bullet Train. We've got Kingsman. So creatively in your process, I don't want to say it messes with you, but I mean, it's different, right? I mean, you score things the way you score things, and I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. But is it different when it comes to your process? Because I'm assuming Bullet Train and Kingsman have a much different vibe than Monsters at Work. Both very good, but both different. Is that something creatively? Is it changed for you, Dom?
It changes all the time, and quite frankly, I need the change to stay sane. I mean, I'm someone with an incredibly, I'm someone with an incredibly eclectic taste in music anyway, so I need to kind of be able to flex all those muscles. Something like Kingsman, even Kingsman and Bullet Train, completely different process. I mean, Bullet Train is something that I've never done anything like this before. I can't go into details, but it's very different for me, which is great. I love being, it's sort of like, it's like an old comfort zone for me. The days of like producing records and stuff like that, and being able to go back to that world a bit more, which is awesome. Whereas Kingsman is this very traditional orchestral score where I lean on my training at the academy. And then, Monsters at Work is jazz, which to the world I've never really written much jazz, but at college I was writing quite a lot of jazz orientated things, and getting the real book out and singing jazz standards and I did a course in jazz improvisation for singing and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to be able to do a lot of stuff because I'm getting to draw from all these parts of my life. I remember being outside remote control at the time I was smoking. Henry Jackman and I were having a cigarette, and another one of my mentors, and he was saying, you've got so many strings to your bow, you should like make sure you can nail every single one of them, because that's going to make you super hireable to all the studios, and having all these different genres that you can execute really well is going to set you aside from any other guy coming out of college who can write music. So sorry, I'm rambling.
No, you're not at all.
But yeah, it's basically from Money Monster to High Castle to Monsters at Work to Peter Rabbit to Kingsman, having that completely different zigzaggy way through my career is totally necessary for me, because that's basically my music taste. And something like Jolt, completely different, moving into the hip hop rock world. It's just like, I feel like I'm going through my head playlist and being able to kind of exercise all those things that are swirling around in my head. So if I do too much of one thing, I feel like it gets a bit stale and a bit boring, or I go mad, one of the two. So I need to do all the different things to kind of stay fresh and stay sane.
Yeah, that's well said. And you took my next question out of my mouth. Henry Jackman, I was just going to ask you about him. So he scores Big Hero 6, and I think you were a part of the musical department on that movie.
I was.
Yeah,
I was.
So here's another great example, right? So this movie, the ending, the score. I mean, I'm embarrassed. I always say I'm in tears, but I legitimately am. That movie, I was pouring and the score. I mean, it was just so beautifully done. when you're on the music department on a movie like this, and I know you're very close with Henry from what you've said. How much do you learn in a situation like that? We've talked about your phenomenal schooling, your early work, learning the cello at 3. But how about a situation where you're part of a music department working with a super talent like Henry Jackman? How important is that to you? Do you learn a lot from that?
Massively. I mean, it's not possible to do, in my view, it's not possible to really be the top of your game if you haven't done some sort of apprenticeship with someone's at the top of his craft. I'm very lucky to have been, in the room and working with, a lot of the greats. So, from John Powell to Hans Zimmer to Henry Jackman to Ramin Djawadi I've worked with a lot of amazing composers and basically just tried to turn myself into as big a sponge as possible and absorb every trick of the trade, every little, whether it's putting notes into a sequencer or dealing with executives, taking a meeting, understanding notes, all of these different things. There's no possible way you could think you could achieve that coming straight out of college. Obviously a lot of us did think that coming out of college, that we can just go in and write a movie, but there's so many different factors to being a film composer. And, writing music's probably like 30% of it. Dealing with executives, dealing with, your team, dealing with all the other crap that goes on a day-to-day basis. That's where I learned the most stuff. Obviously picked up tricks musically from all of those amazing guys, but learning how to deal with directors, learning how to kind of nurture them into a way of thinking, or, understanding their vernacular when it comes to expressing notes and what they want for a scene. That was super important because, with a lot of friends that didn't go through the remote world, I find them getting very frustrated with getting notes and things. And oftentimes it's just a way of interpreting that and not kind of panicking when you get all these notes from a director or a producer or whatever. Because they just have a stream of consciousness. They'll just like, okay, I'm saying this, I'm saying this, I'm saying this. When in actual fact, if you open up the cue and look at it, it's probably like, they don't like the trumpet there and we need a slightly different arc in these 6 bars. I digress. But basically, someone like Henry, someone like John, someone like Hans, being around them for the years it was invaluable. And I've often said in interviews that remote control is probably the best university any young composer could have. I learned more in a month at that place than I did in 4 years at the academy, in terms of the business and what it takes to be a composer. Not in terms of writing for horn and trombone, but you know what I mean. I'm rambling on, but yeah, it's so important to do that. And if you can, then one should as a young composer.
No, and hearing you talk, I mean, you could be a composer. I don't care what anybody does for a living. What you just said applies to anything. Like if you're not a sponge in any craft or any field, something's wrong with that. And you know, I'm listening to you talk, and it's just all clicking and making sense. I've said this before, but Christopher Nolan has a no cell phone policy on set. And when I read that, I'm thinking, who the hell would bring out a cell phone if you're on a Christopher Nolan set? I would be absorbing everything that goes on. Like, you have to be kidding me. I mean, you wouldn't text if Mozart was, it's insane to me. Talk to me about your process, right? Because I've heard a bunch of things. Guests that I've had, guests that, or composers that I haven't had, but I admire. I've heard everything from, reading the scripts to, watching dialogue, deciding where the music fits. And I know the director has input to where music should go and what should go. And I know it's all different too. So how does the scoring scene in your process work? I mean, you don't have to go into super details here. I don't want to, take up all your time, but does it vary by project?
Very much so. It's very different. It kind of varies by genre more than it does project, I think. For example, it's kind of project based. When I do kind of electronically based things, I tend to kind of compile all the audio I think is going to be useful. And let me give you an example. So for something like Spooks the Greater Good or Money Monster, I sort of find what the subject matter is and find audio related to that, throw it all into my computer and just start messing around with it and see what comes out of that. And oftentimes, if I'm like compressing something way too much and then adding delays, I'll get this little motif that I'm like, "Oh, grab that! That's going to be great." And then it just kind of snowballs from that. That was definitely the process for those two films. For traditional scores, like Goosebumps 2, or like a Freebirds, or to a certain extent Monsters at Work and Peter Rabbit, but they were slightly different. I tend to go to the piano and figure out what my melodies are, having either read a script or seen a snippet of the movie, or sometimes a rough cut of the movie. So for something that's kind of orchestrally dominant, I will definitely sit at the piano, make sure that the melodies I'm coming up with work on a piano. Because a lot of times when you go straight to the sequencer, you can kind of use your tricks and use all the fancy orchestration to make it sound good. But if it's not like bare bones, catchy, great melody, I don't want to know about it. So I start at the piano. Monsters at Work was slightly different because it's jazz-based. And Bob Ganaway, the showrunner, really wanted to hone in on themes for a couple months. Catchy themes. He was like, I need earworms. I don't want to deal with any, I don't want just random stuff. I want very specific character themes before we even look at the picture. So I had kind of like printouts of what the characters looked like, and I was just sort of coming up with themes based on like their backstory and like a little kind of drawing of the character, which was kind of cool. And then those themes obviously are carried through the show. Rabbits was kind of different because Will was such a song-orientated guy that I really had to work at getting him over to the score side of things. So it sort of started with me kind of writing band-orientated things, and then I'd add like a wind quartet, and then slowly but surely just adding more orchestral elements on top of the band that I created that he'd approved. So eventually we got to a place where he's like, that's the sound of the score. But again, initially, the main melody of that movie was constructed with me sitting at a piano and singing the melody and trying to figure that out. I think that's all the processes I do or have done so far.
Yeah, it certainly does. Sounds like it varies by project, and thank you for that. My last two questions for you are this. So before, I got on with you, I was just looking through BBC Magazine had a top 10 list of movie composers. I bring his name up a lot during my podcast, but Thomas Newman was not on it. He's a 15-time Academy Award nominee. I mean, he is, forget the award stuff. He just, to me, like if I took all my favorite movies, it's no coincidence that he's the composer of almost everything. So
he's not in the top 10.
He's not in the top 10. No.
That's madness.
Yes. So
that's madness.
It's madness. And my last two questions for you is, I know you spent time around Hans Zimmer, he was number 3, which he probably should have been bumped up a little bit higher. He probably should have been 1 or 2. But anyways, John Williams was 1 or 2. One or two. But they went classic and old school, and I get that too, because you can't forget those who have come before. I get that. But some of the ones they put before Thomas Newman, I would politely disagree with. But so if I was introducing somebody to movies, what makes Hans Zimmer great and what makes Thomas Newman great in your eyes? What makes those two guys really special?
Well, I haven't had any experience firsthand with Thomas. I adore his music. The one thing that makes them special is that they're innovators. They change the course of film music. I mean, Hans keeps doing it. That's what makes him such a genius. But Thomas Newman's sound is something that we'd never heard before. First came. I don't know what his first score is, but the first score I remember hearing, where I was like, whoa, what is that? That is so accessible, but yet so different and so cool, was when I watched Shawshank Redemption. That score just blew me away, because I was like, at that point, in love with film music, and was very much like a John Williams, Alan Silvestri, Goldsmith fanatic. And then here was this guy who was using kind of like different soundscapes and weird kind of drones and ethnic instruments and a lot of woodwinds, but kind of really coolly recorded. And you know, a lot of kind of George Deering stuff, which at the time I didn't know it was George Deering, and then, you know, later in life I was lucky enough to work with George and adore George. So I think just to be able to kind of come up with the sound that has spread across so many movies and influenced pretty much every TV show in the 2000s, like the amount of times both of those guys have been ripped off is just unbelievable. And I've probably done it myself without realizing. And when it comes to Hans, I mean, I'm one of those lucky people that's just witnessed it firsthand, and been able to be a part of the Zimmer, him and his mind, and the way he is able to just come up with stuff that just changes the game. I mean, he's been through so many genre-defying decades, like from Rain Man to the Days of Thunder days to the Gladiator days to the Inception days like he changes the game every single time. And I think it's because he's not okay with the first thing he thinks of. I mean, he labors and labors over that initial idea and has like almost an hour of material for, you know, the first suite. Like in a night, he'd do an hour of material for the the first part of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And there's so many. I mean, I have that recording of his mock-up, and there's so many awesome ideas in there that just didn't make the film. But again, you know, something like the Joker suite, hours and hours of material that he made Nolan listen to on a plane, and made, like, you know, the Interstellar was a year of work before they even started working on the actual cut of the film. He's just an absolute genius when it comes to coming up with new sounds for telling story, and that's because he's not just a composer; he's a filmmaker. I mean, he lives and breathes film, and he just happens to be an incredible musician at the same time. So I have a lot of love for Hans and a lot of respect, and I just feel so lucky that I was able to kind of be around him for so many years and again be a sponge and absorb. I wish I'd had that opportunity with Thomas, but I can love and appreciate his music from afar and in the movies that he's been a part of.
Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned one of the most underrated scores from Hans Zimmer. Days of Thunder is as good as they come. You know, and it should be talked about a lot more than it is, because it really is a really well done score. Before the pandemic hit, we were lucky enough to see Hans in concert. And, oh, God, you know, I have never been so blown away in my life. I'm very lucky to live in a time where we have composers like you and Hans Zimmer and all these wonderful people we've been talking about the last 40 minutes. And Dom, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, and I hope you come back. And when you do, I expect my gin and tonic cold.
Oh yeah, the only way to have it. You can't have a warm.
Well, you know, some people settle for anything. It has to be nice and chilled. But you know what? I have to say, I am so lucky and fortunate to have you, and I'm really looking forward to what the road ahead for you. Is there anything that you wanted to throw out there, whether it's social media or what you have coming up? We've talked about some of it. Anything you want to just get out there?
I mean, I'm on all the social medias, I think. I don't know if there's any I've missed, but it's Instagram, Twitter, and I'm on Facebook too. And things coming up. Yeah, we mentioned it. The Kingsman's coming out. I'm working on Bullet Train right now, which is incredibly exciting, and I have to pinch myself regularly that I'm getting to work with David Leitch on that. And you actually, earlier we talked about Big Hero 6. I'm actually doing some Baymax shorts.
Very cool.
They are so cool. There's I don't know if I can say how many there are, but there's some Baymax shorts, and they are adorable and a joy to work on. So I don't know when they're coming out. I'm still working on them, but there's that coming soon, I hope.
His name is Dom Lewis. Dom, thank you so much.
Thank you, bud.
Thank you for listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also connect with Monday Morning Critic on Instagram and Facebook, MDM Critic on Twitter, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. All episodes available, www.mmcpodcast.com.